Right, I'll begin then. So, commodities. What are commodities? Well, you may not have an idea about what commodities are, but hopefully you will by the end of the presentation. Commodities are simply goods. They're physical items. So when people think commodities, they think the more obvious ones, which are sort of oil is a very big commodity, gold, another big commodity. But there's a whole branch of commodities, and these can be really niche, or these can be really, really big and heavily traded by a lot of people. And so, as to a sort of general definition of a commodity, you can think of it as a sort of generic, largely unprocessed good that can be resold. So it's standardized, it's easily defined. And what I mean by this is the way it's standardized is you'll have a barrel of oil, and that is what's sold. It's the barrel of oil. Or you'll have a metric ton of iron. And I don't know, a bushel of wheat. I don't think they do it in bushels anymore, but that's the sort of thing we're talking about here. Give me an example. Well, you can see some examples on the screen there, and I'll just clarify what I mean. Soft commodities tend to be sort of agricultural products. You can see corn, cotton, sugar, coffee. And hard commodities tend to be obviously hard things. So it's kind of in the name. Copper. You got square steel piping there, gold, silver, whatever. So these are all hard commodities. And I mean, these are quite vague. These are quite kind of broad items. But within that, within steel, for example, you can get very, very niche topics. Like there, as I said, you can get square bars. You can also get steel scrap or iron ore or whatever. Oil in particular, you have WTI and Brent are the main two different types. So there's lots of different things you can trade. So why should I trade them? Well, gold may be for dinosaurs, but there's a reason it's for dinosaurs, and that's because it's been around for so long. So I'll list a few reasons here. You can't go wrong with diversification. It's the number one reason. You want to be able to trade as many asset types as possible. You want to be able to trade commodities. You want to be able to trade options and futures, crypto, stocks, whatever you want to trade. It's good to have a really diverse range. So that's reason number one. And reason number two is it's a good way of hedging. And I'll come on to what hedging means in a minute, briefly, because I think we're going to talk about this later on in the week. It's a good way of hedging, which means market swings against you. All a hedge is it's an investment that reduces the risk of your portfolio. So let's say your portfolio like fluctuates loads, it goes up and down and whatever. A hedge would be a sort of trade that you take on to lower that risk, lower that volatility. And lastly, is because saying I trade commodities is pretty fucking cool. So there you go. Gold. Traditionally used as a hedge against inflation. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you're in a country, admittedly this doesn't happen so much in the West, but the currency has just gone through the roof, hyperinflation or whatever. Gold is seen as a store of value. It's been seen as a store of value for, thousands of years. So while money value decreases, gold maintains its value. While there's massively high volatility in whatever market you're in, people will perhaps be afraid of that, and they'll want to go and trade gold instead, because it's seen as a very secure option. So that's an example of a metal commodity there. Oil is an interesting one. So oil is a very interesting way of almost trading geopolitics or politics. So we can talk about a lot of things here, but think Saudi Arabian government policy. Saudi Arabia produces a lot of the world's oil. So any sort of quotas or tariffs, or if they decide to massively up production, this is going to have a big effect on the oil price. And you can say the same for Trump and his fracking, trying to make the US energy dependent. All these sort of political events will have a large effect on the oil price. And what that means is you can trade political events by trading the oil price. So it's very useful. And those aren't the only things that sort of correlate with oil. You have general economic growth correlates quite well, but also like the airplane, the whole holiday industry. If no one's going on holidays, the aeroplanes to take them there don't need any oil. And so oil will crash, Supply and demand is very simple, but it manifests in lots and lots of different ways. And also, interestingly, I don't know if you heard earlier in the year, this would have been a year ago now, maybe March or February 2020, but oil contracts went negative. How does that happen? Well, I'll come on to that in later weeks, but it's a very interesting fact of the world commodity markets that these things can go negative. So perhaps you want to read further about that. And lastly, as a main player, we have coffee, which is an agricultural good. And just briefly on agricultural goods, they're affected by different things. Let's talk weather. Weather will affect agricultural goods to a much greater extent than, iron or oil. I don't know if you've seen the film Trading Places, but they were trading off the basis of a weather report coming out of Middle America for the orange juice market. It's stuff like that. They're also very susceptible to disease, which is another factor you can trade. So that's a sort of agricultural example. So this brings us on to kind of a sum up. Why shouldn't I trade commodities? Well, as I've said, if you're interested in politics, trade commodities. If you're interested in economic policy, you can trade commodities. If you're interested in the weather patterns or climate change, which is a big topic these days, you can trade this via commodities. What you want to be doing is whatever sort of knowledge you have in life, and this will generally be because you're very interested in this as a topic, but you want to be able to trade that and make money off it. So let's say you've done a lot of research into climate change, how it's going to affect the world, how it's going to, become a bigger part of our lives moving forward. Then you want to be able to trade that. So, for example, Norway, before the world goes carbon neutral in 20 to 30 years, have massively ramped up oil production because they don't want to be sitting on a load of oil they can't use in 20 or 30 years' time. So it's stuff like this that you really want to be able to trade. So as a sum up, you have hedging, you have diverse range of assets that you can do, and you have being able to trade whatever knowledge you have. So these are the three very important points. And that's about it, but I'll leave it up to the others to answer your questions. And if they can't, then they can always come back to me and I'll try and answer them for you. So thank you very much and goodbye.